But before we get started, let's recognize a few people in the room. Mike from La Pata, one of our sponsors, if you could raise your hand, please. Let's see, Brittany from Parkside, are you in the room? Brittany's up here. Grant from Atomic was helping with the chairs. Hey, Grant. Jason from Swip is running the tech over here. Larry from Weiss Advisors is actually in Cancun, so we can all be jealous of him. Tom from Black Twig was doing check-ins. There's Tom in the back corner. Jamie from CMA up here in the front. Paul from Polsinelli. I don't think he could make it today. And then Matt from the Sage Group and Fortis also helping with chairs in the back. Thank you. If we could have a round of applause for all of them, please. They make this morning possible. So the room that you're sitting in, the drinks that you're drinking, the food, the connections you're making, it's all made possible because of them. So I thought I'd skip a formal intro this morning because a lot of you know us and know me. I'm Tom Swip. This is our 14th year of MML. And it wouldn't be made possible except for all of our great members. So if you don't know about us, there are little cards on the table. Come see us on LinkedIn. We got about 10,500 people in the group on LinkedIn. Tons of great conversations going out there. We meet here 6 times a year, second Friday, odd months. 2 times a year, which March will be the next one of these, we do a manufacturing only event. So that's manufacturing, industrial, and distribution companies. We give them an opportunity to meet in a more intimate setting and learn from other manufacturers. But then we'll all be back together in May. And if you look, there's a half pager on your table that tells all the upcoming dates and everything. We're working on a great lineup of speakers the entire year, so we really look forward to seeing you at some of those events. Me personally, Tom Swip, Swip Systems, we celebrated 30 years in business last August, so we're we are a software company, so we help companies build, buy, or both software. I'm also involved in a company called Guard911 and Hero 911. What we do is we wrap geofences around schools and workplaces, and we put a mobile panic button off your phone in the hand of all the teachers and staff, janitors, everyone there. And then we have 70,000 officers that carry our Hero 911 app, and we watch, and when people cross through the geofences that we build around those locations, we connect those officers to those locations temporarily so that if an alarm goes off in one of those geofences, the people that are there and the closest get to see that, and then they can get there the fastest. So even a guy in flip-flops with a go bag in his trunk at the grocery store across from the high school, we've literally had people show up in 15 seconds when one of those alarms goes off. My phone, I get the alert in about 11 to 17 seconds, so we're just trying to get people there faster to save more lives. So Guard911 and Hero 911. And then, of course, MML. So appreciate you all being here. Okay, are we ready to learn about AI? All right, so I haven't had the privilege of addressing the group since January of 2024. So to say that a lot has transpired in the last 2 years in AI would be almost the understatement of the world, right? So we're gonna get kicked off and we're gonna get going here. So we're gonna do 2 things. We're gonna look backwards at what has transpired, and we're also gonna look forward at what's coming, and then give you some examples, the manufacturers some examples of exactly how you could use this in your business. So before we really get kicked off, I wanted to do a little survey in the room by show of hands. How many people use an LLM? That would mean ChatGPT, Gemini, Grok, Copilot, just directly into the LLM or through Google tools or through Microsoft tools every day? All right, look around, please. That was a very different show of hands 2 years ago. So the LLMs are just those things. They are, well, let's back up a little bit. AI was mostly something that ran in the background of everything. You know, you never really knew about it until you were working on it and you were asked somebody to engage it for you. So it's always been around. If you remember from 2024, we've been working on AI for 70 years. So it started way back in the 50s. So if you remember in 23, we were all scared. We weren't sure if Skynet was coming or what was happening. Set yourself back there. We had just been out of the virus and things were kind of getting back to normal. And then all of a sudden AI came along and everybody's like, oh wow, what's this? And there was half the people that were like, this is cool, and half of them were scared shitless. So I was somewhere right in the middle, you know. I remember the old the movie about Skynet and Terminator where they said everyone stood back and marveled at their intelligence and what they had built in AI. And it seemed very much like that in 2023, 2022. So if you remember ChatGPT, the first LLM that really made it happen, didn't come about really until November of 22. So by 23, we were just kind of getting into this whole thing and getting it going. So those LLMs, they changed the way that AI works because they started making AI conversational. LLM, large language model. It's all the information in the world plugged into a computer and you can talk to it. So think about the days, some of the older folks in the room where you were flipping through your encyclopedia, you had an encyclopedia salesman come out and he would sell you the encyclopedias, and then as kids we would flip through the encyclopedias and find what we had to look for. Just imagine that encyclopedia being worldwide and available literally on an app on your phone. That's what we're dealing with these days. So LLM, large language model, excuse me, it actually understands speech. And then don't forget too that there are different modes of this. There's vision, speech, multimodal, and world models. So you can talk to it, you can text it, you can actually use it on your Google Glasses, you can use it on robots in the plant, which we'll get to. It's multimodal, that's what that terminology means. And then bots are kind of the conversation layer. So how many people, by show of hands, have interacted with a bot on a website? Your bank, tech support, shopping, look around if you would, keep your hands up for a second. Just about everybody in the room's engaging LLM through the bots. So it's an important distinction to know there. And then the bots just basically allow people to chat with the LLM. It doesn't make AI smarter, it just makes AI accessible. And then the agents, so now we're gonna go up a little level here. How many people are building, I'm not talking about going into one of the LLMs and just giving it a big prompt, but how many people are building or working with or engaging with agents in AI? Show of hands. Okay, take a look around. Those folks that have their hand raised, they are taking the next step into AI, and we're going to talk a little bit about that today. And then AI apps are the actual product. So this is mostly software that leverages AI in the background to do whatever it is that it needs to do. And we gave some examples of that on different things. But one client we worked with was a psychological testing company. They would feed a result of a survey of one of their customers into the LLM. The LLM manages everything, looks at all the dots, understands the puzzles that you solved and all that, and spits out a report. That's an example of an AI app where we're using software to not only collect and manage everything, but push the data up into the LLMs and pull down the result to simplify things. So they're the structure around AI, and that's where everything's headed. So you'll see everybody's talking about AI these days. You know, the first enabled this system, the first AI enabled that system. Those apps are where we're all headed, but they're still gonna leverage those LLMs on the back end. Okay, before we move on, any questions about that? Those are real important distinctions for the discussion today. Okay, let's keep going. Okay, let's take a look back now. Remember, 2023, we're getting out of COVID, getting a little bit normal. ChatGPT just came out in 2022. We got a 50-50 people split between those that love it, those that are scared to death of it, and let's talk a little bit about it. So generative AI became something that was coming along. So, you know, it was generating conversations, it was working through the process, you could engage with it and everything like that. Multimodal started coming along. So who remembers the first version of Google? I don't think it was called Google Glass, but they were the Google Glasses that came out a few years ago. And then they just completely went away. And now they're back again. And they're pretty impressive, you know, because they can, you can turn up volume essentially, you can engage, you can hear more, you can turn your music on, you know, they're pretty impressive how they work. That's one example of multimodal AI. And then we began working on integrations and accessibility. So the ability to integrate with AI, the ability to access AI through different modes, like those glasses. And we started seeing later in 2023 that there was more enterprise adoption, but it was more like the people that were just coming around to the internet in 1995, where they were experimenting, poking around on it, seeing what it could do. Weren't quite sure what you could do with it, but it was fun, and it was really, quite honestly, very smart back then. We also started into ethical and regulatory focus. So if you remember, NIST put together a huge standard about, hey, if we're going to do this, we'll talk about this a little bit later, but we've got to do it ethically. If you're in DoD, you've got to be very transparent about it, and you've got to make sure that the privacy is there, which we'll also talk about that a little bit later. So all those concerns started bubbling up into regulations. And then human AI collaboration. So people started using it to ask about problems with their spouse, or how I've got this board meeting coming up. What should I do in order to address this with the board? You know, just anything you can imagine. How do I work on my car? You know, my refrigerator is making this noise. So we started getting into this human AI interaction, and people started realizing what it was really doing for them and what it could do for them. So then in 2024, we started getting into more advanced reasoning and chain of thought model. Essentially a chain of thought. How many people here use Google to do searches? Okay, look around, take a look, keep your hands up. And you know that little AIO search at the top there that comes up, that little summary? Most people don't go much past that summary anymore unless they question what the AIO has brought up. But then if you see on the bottom of that, it says, I forget the exact button, but it's essentially dig deeper with AI. And you can dig deeper into that question that you had and into that conversation that you had, so that you can drill down on this set of data. Just imagine what that would have been like in 2021. You would have had to go to about 15 websites and make your own assimilation of everything that was in there, kind of pull that together, and hopefully make the correct assumption of what it was. Well, now you can get a response like that. It'll look through 10, 15 websites, pull all that information, and then you can dig deeper on that. Side note, if you are not changing your website to work with AIO, you're behind the times. Shaking your head over here. So it's AEO now, AI engine optimization. You need FAQs and things like that on your website because the AIs are going to specific places to look on your website to look. They are scanning your site, but they would rather see, here's an FAQ about this page, and the AI engine will punch into that, and then you have a better chance of popping up in those AIO search results. So if you're not doing that, please get with your marketing folks and make that change. So true multimodal and real-time interaction. So, you know, we could talk back and forth with it. Speech was coming along. The Google Glasses, again, is another example. Professional grade video and audio generation. Do you remember some of the first video generation? I remember all I wanted to do was put a keypad on the front of a professional-looking school building. And it could do it really well, but it could not get the numbers on the keypad right. It was 1, 1, 3, 4, 7, 8, 9, you know, that kind of thing. So after about an hour, we're like, okay, let's just go see if we can buy an image, because it didn't work back then. But now, with things like Google VO3 and deepfake, we'll talk about it a little bit later, it's getting scary, you know, because you can't tell. You used to be able to tell, some experts can tell, but a lot of times you can't tell because the lighting's right, the tilt of the heads are right, everything's just right, where it's really hard these days to tell on some of these really good, really well-made videos if it is real or if it is fake. But back then in 2024, we were getting over that curve. It has come light years from that. So your ability to create video and create images, even with the ChatGPT engine, is just phenomenal. Integration into physical devices. How many people have seen, by show of hands, a commercial for the Google AI phone? Or Apple phone now has AI. You know, it's everywhere. If you go to buy a new PC, I got a new PC for the office the other day, and now it is an AI-enabled HP PC. So, you know, it comes with its own AI where you can ask tech support questions, everything along those lines. So they're building that AI in, almost like an AI app that's punching back into the LLMs to get the data that it needs, or it's punching into an internal AI that people can access and query and things along those lines. But we're really getting deep into the physical device integration. Back to Google Glass, another great example of that. Breakthroughs in science and biology. I have a brother-in-law that worked for 10 years to map the human genome, and they had to splice in frog DNA and all these things. For 10 years they did this. AI's already cracked the genome on its own. So it can happen just that quickly. And then the advancements we're seeing in research and science and manufacturing of rocket parts by NASA and everything has just come light years ahead of where it had been. And then again, global governance and regulations. So we'll talk about briefly about the EU AI initiative coming up here soon. And now it became even more of a factor because we'll talk a little bit later here, there was a debate between two future political characters, and one of them, if you look closely, is a deepfake. It never happened. So people are trying to sway our judgment by these deepfakes and everything. So it's getting interesting. That brings us up to last year. So now we shifted more to agentic and automations in AI. So agentic is AI agents. So like we talked about earlier, that's where I've built a project in Grok or an agent in ChatGPT, and that agent has a very, very specific role. So you probably also noticed there used to be like a ChatGPT, you could only buy a subscription, but now I can buy a corporate subscription. Or a multi-user business subscription, which is 5 or more users, and I can buy a corporate subscription, which is 200 or more users. So you can even see the engines are changing from single use to entire organizations that can use these. So now that there's that larger shift, you'll see more and more agents, and each little agent does its own little thing. So you might actually, and we'll talk about this later also, you might actually tie together 5 agents to all speak together, but each one of them goes and does its own little thing. This one goes, gets the data and uploads it from here. This one gets the data and uploads it from here. This one does the same thing. And then another agent processes all that data. So you can assemble all these agents into essentially an application. The era of reasoning models. So the reasoning model skyrocketed, the capability for it to think more and think harder. AI has surpassed the capability of the smartest person on the planet, and they're working towards it surpassing the collective mindset of everyone on the planet. So that's the next thing that we're working towards, but we've already gotten past it. It's passed the bar, it's passed the medical exams, it does phenomenal on psychological tests. It's just unbelievable what this thing can really do, or what these things really can do. Again, physical and multimodal integration increased, and then this is one that's important to manufacturers, the VLA models, so the vision, language, action models, the ability for AI to see something and translate what's going on and then react to it. For instance, like a robot picking from a container, all of the pieces that it was picking all had to be like staged essentially, because the robot would make X and Y movements. Once it picked this one, it would do it, and it knew, okay, now I got to go to the next one, I got to go to the next one. Now we'll show a little picture up here later. It can look into a bin of mishmash parts and go in and pick out the one that it needs to pick out. So that VLA integration has really, really come along. It was first announced in 2023, but by 2025, it is just really rock solid. You're seeing and hearing about, and we'll talk about this, hardware and infrastructure investments. So data centers are going up all over the place. So they need more hardware. There needs to be more investment. We'll talk about Amazon's investment in that and everything. And then because of the hardware and infrastructure need, and therefore investment, there have been more and more optimized hardware and energy breakthroughs that have come through. So chips that run much faster but use less power, produce less heat, everything along those lines. So the GPUs rather than the CPUs, those are really coming along and coming along quickly. Okay, I'm going to pause there before we get into 2026. Questions, comments? Okay, let's keep rolling. All right, the approach that we took with this presentation is the good, the bad, the ugly, and the bizarre. We used 4 different platforms to create this presentation. So we did queries on Gemini using AIO. We did queries on ChatGPT. We used AI within the Prezi presentation. If anybody's curious, that's what this model is. And then we did some research in Grok, and I'm missing one. There's another one that we used. There were probably 4 or 5 of them. But we used AI to do this, and the ability to pull together some of this data and get it into a presentable format for all of you was just phenomenal, and it went very, very quickly. Okay, let's get into it. All right, first thing we're going to talk about is some very specific examples of how manufacturers could use AI. So we're going to dig beneath the, hey, I'm just going to put a prompt up there and actually talk through some of these. We'll start with some prompts, we'll move into some more specific examples, and then we'll move into a little bit of the VLA architecture that we talked about already. Okay, so if you can think back to just straightforward LLMs, you can always go into an LLM and ask it any amount of information that you want. The problem is a lot of times you have to feed data up to it. We'll also talk about this a little bit more. Be careful about what you're feeding up into the LLMs. A lot of them have turned to this point where they are not collecting your data and they're not using AI to, or you're using your prompts and the feedback to train the AI, but there's still a chance for anything like that to go up there. At one point, Grok accidentally released 300,000 conversations. There was a URL for every one of the conversations, and those URLs were not properly protected, so 300,000 AI conversations went out on the web and were searchable by Google. They've since plugged that. It's been years now, but please be careful with everything that you do. But let's talk about a couple of pretty specific examples. Now, on all of these examples, you can think about it. I could go to the LLM and I could ask it. I could have a chatbot built that would ask it. I could go and build an agent in which I could ask it, or I could wrap this into an app. Where you're at in your AI journey kind of depends on how you would approach these. Ultimately, we're all going to get to AI apps. There will be apps that will be built that will do specific things and then query the LLM for the things that it needs. So just imagine an ERP system, but you get to the point where you're ready to ship. You've got 10 warehouses. Here's the cost of freight in each one of those. Here's the location that it needs to go to. Excuse me. The ERP will go out to the LLM at that point in time and pull that data back and ask the LLM what's the best scenario here. So we're all heading that direction eventually, but we can start at any different level. So our first example, a material substitution advisement. So I'm designing a product, I've run out of a product, I'm having trouble with a vendor, whatever the case is. The prompt that I could put into one of those four would be, what could replace this polymer and still make safety standards, by way of example. So I've got a material problem, I need a solution, I need it quickly. I can turn to AI and I can get results from that rather quickly to find out what that is. And then again, back to that conversational model or the way that it's generative, I can, once it gives me an answer, I can ask it questions about the answer. So it's conversational in the sense that I can keep digging until I get my answer. Another example, upload data for explaining my machine efficiency. So let's say that I've got generic machine efficiency and it wouldn't mean anything to anybody. I could go to one of the LLMs, or I could build an agent, or I could build an app, and I could say, here is all my machine data for line 3, and here's all the historical data for line 3. How come line 3's efficiency decreased yesterday? What happened? And as we all know, AI is very good at looking at large sets of data. It can analyze that and extract things that we would never think of as human beings, and it can do it in a fraction of a second. How many people here are under some kind of an audit requirement? ISO, FDA, CFR, okay, something along those lines. So anybody that has any kind of those requirements, and even your own policies, you can turn that over to AI for audit prep assistance, and you can say, here again, be careful with your policy, or have it under a private AI or an agent or an app. You can upload that data and say, please check this, upload a documentation, and tell me about the weaknesses that the auditor is going to dig out. So you know ahead of time going into the audit, if you're prepared, you don't have to wait for the day of, get 15 nonconformances and then spend the next 6 months cleaning up your documentation. You can get ahead of that process and put that all in ahead of time and know the answers to those questions. And then as another example, knowledge preservation. So how many folks are in some type of machining or welding or piping, something that needs skilled labor for what they do? Yeah, so it's kind of a dying breed, right? My grandpa was the true old world craftsman. But you don't see as many of those people away. You would go into his basement and we couldn't touch anything, and he had everything you could imagine to build anything that you could imagine, and he could do it. He had the knowledge and the capability to do it. We don't see that as much in the younger generations. It's still there. There's a lot of incredible pilot programs and programs that we're bringing students up and everything, but that knowledge is a dying breed, or those craftsmen are a dying breed. So the ability to go to someone that troubleshoots your conveyor lines and knows all of it, but he's the only guy that knows it. Hey, call Bob, and Bob fixes it in 5 minutes. Everybody's like, hey, Bob, what did you do? That's a prime opportunity to sit Bob down in front of AI and pose different, sorry, I got an alarm going off, bad timing, pose different questions to Bob, and Bob simply speak to the AI and tell him what he would do in each one of those situations, and all that knowledge gets transferred into the AI. And then we'll have another example here where we could build a single source of truth, and we can have Bob's information along with our SOPs and our engineering diagrams and our training data and everything in one location, where we can then have someone who's brand new to the conveyor system. Oh, well, Bob always just walked down and hit breaker 15. Nobody knew it, right? But Bob did. And if he leaves and retires, all that information leaves with him. So that tribal knowledge, there's an excellent way of capturing that. So senior technicians, anything along those lines, engineers, anything along those lines to be able to preserve that knowledge. So again, could use any one of the 4 examples to do this. You could do this right away, but just be careful if you're using just a plain LLM, be careful what you're dumping into the LLM. Questions? All right, let's keep going. So let's dig a little bit deeper. How many people that are manufacturers in the room have a problem sometimes with MRP, material resource planning? Yeah, if you're in manufacturing, you probably have MRP problems. And they result from everything from a truck breaks down to the materials no longer available. In COVID times, it wasn't being produced, you couldn't get it, or you couldn't get the ships into port. So if you're in manufacturing, you have MRP problems of some sort, probably on a regular basis. So what this example talks about is using AI to assist with MRP and eventually scheduling so that you don't have as many problems as you do. So MRP typically runs once, twice a day in a lot of the current ERPs, but the problem is between the 24-hour period that it runs, something changes, right? Just any one of those examples that we just talked about, something happens. So what you could do is you could give the AI, again, this is probably more along the lines of an agent or an AI app, because you don't want to just dump all this data into the LLM. So you could give it inputs such as your current MRP output. So whatever produced your MRP, you could upload those results into AI. You could upload your open sales orders. So here's everything that I've got to produce over, let's say, the next 30 days. You could put in any kind of information like supplier delays, equipment breakdowns, truck breakdowns, anything along those lines, and your machine availability, and upload all of that into it, and then give it your inventory. If you have multiple warehouses, give it your inventory by warehouse. And then last but not least, you could feed in something like freight costs in each one of those regions. And AI will come back and tell you things along the lines, this is just an example, if no action is taken, 12 orders will miss promise dates, 4 high margin orders are at risk, warehouse 1 will run out of stock in 5 days, and expediting the product will cost you $84,000. Now, just think of the impact of that, and just think of how many people on that project for however long of a period of time to figure out that that was the outcome of this. And the other thing too is they might not have come to those conclusions, but AI is good at analyzing large amounts of data, it's good at making suggestions, it can really dig in and it can do things. And then it could give you options like option A, you could resequence your production. So for instance, you could move forward with product X, delay product Y by 3 days. 2 lower priority orders are going to be missed, and the cost is $30,000. Now remember, it's conversational. So what do you ask about that? Well, who's getting product X? Who is not getting the low? Who are the people that are not going to get the low priorities? And what's the breakdown of the $30,000? So you could go in and you could query it, and you could work with it just like a consultant would, and you would go in and dive through the data, the questions, and then be able to come to a conclusion that you'd like to see. But again, would we have figured that out? Maybe, maybe not. Some excellent schedulers would have. The problem that a lot of us have is we're just too busy. You don't have time to dig into one situation for the next 7 hours. AI can give it to you in a matter of seconds. Option B, you could do a partial supplier split. Just as an example, we could expedite 30% of the sub-assemblies. We could reallocate inventory between warehouses. This would protect the largest customers, and the cost is $22,000. So again, who are the largest customers that we're going to protect? What warehouse do we have to reallocate? And what's the cost of moving that inventory between warehouses? And then what's the breakdown on my $30,000? Conversational again, so we can dive in even deeper. So at the bottom there it just says allows the planner to ask questions about options and other scenarios. And then the more advanced this is built, probably in an AI app scenario or built into your ERP, once you're done working with the AI and working through the conversation, you come out with a result, you can have the AI execute this, so it makes adjustments to the schedule. It makes adjustments to your purchases, your purchase orders, and everything along those lines. Maybe it goes back to a vendor and it requests more material, whatever the case is. So AI can be built to go ahead and execute that. In this day and age, you're of course going to want to have a human double check all of those moves, but in 2026, by the end of 2026, will be another giant step forward, and you won't have to go back and have so much human interaction to the point where this will eventually become autonomous. It's like anything that we prototype in our business. You prototype it, you design it, you figure out the process, you test it on a prototype platform, and then you move forward with the next step of it. So it's an entire process, but it happens just like that, almost immediate with the results. Okay, any questions on that example?
Hey, Tom?
Yeah.
Makes perfect sense. Is this theory or is this real?
This is real. Yeah, this is real today. The only thing stopping you from doing something like this is the mechanism to get all the data up into AI in a secure format, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So this is probably an ERP vendor has this implementation built in, or you build an implementation alongside of the ERP vendor to do this stuff in the background. It would really depend entirely on the how advanced your ERP is, quite honestly.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Do you ever challenge the AI?
Yeah. So we were doing some work for Guard911, and we said, who is the superintendent for Dixon School District in Texas? And it said, oh, that's Bob Smith. Thank you for that information. Who is the superintendent for this school district in Texas? Oh, that's Bob Smith. And you can go back and you can go, are you sure because you said Bob Smith was the superintendent of District A and you're also telling me it's District B? Grok will come back and it'll go, oh yeah, you're right. Thanks for that information. And it'll give you the right information. So yeah, you absolutely have to challenge it at these days. AIO, it's great that it's right there. It's easy on your phone. You don't have to click through 10 websites to get the information. It is not always correct. Hallucinations are what you see. And then quite honestly, if somebody who's pushing an agenda or has bad information or something along those lines is better at AEO, they're going to show up in the results, the AIO results. So you've always got to take a look at it right now. But in 2020, by the end of 2026, we will be to the point where the comfort level with AI is much higher than it is where we're at right now.
Yeah, I was thinking along the same lines. I had a conversation with Grok about some STEAM calculations and asked it to do some math, and it was wrong. And I said, your math doesn't math. I said, let me take another look. Yeah. And it comes back to, you were right. It was, so if you're talking uploading, large volumes of MRP data and in seconds making a big decision based off of what it tells you, was it 84,000 or was it 8.4 or,
yeah.
Something. And so how do you build trust?
Yeah, the one way to build trust is to build an agent or an AI app where you give it a lot of guardrails, because if you just flip a question like this over into ChatGPT free, it's looking at its entire knowledge set. So if you feed a really long prompt into it and you define, we're a mid-sized manufacturer, this is what we produce, and you build a long prompt that shows all the details in there, what you're going to get back is going to be a whole lot better. But the agents allow you to really wrap the guardrails around it. Back to that psychological testing company, we really had to tell it what we were trying to look for and what we were trying to accomplish. And now, rather than the AI working through everything, it works through this set of guardrails that we've built for it so we can trust it even better. We're essentially telling it, these are the sources where you go for information. Don't just go get anything. But the math, yeah, it's still something you would think, right? We're going to have X is going to have humanoid robots in their factories walking across a plant floor carrying material by the end of 2026, yet Grok can't get the math right. So there's a little bit of an imbalance there that we're going to have to keep an eye on. Was there another question over here? Okay, let's move along. Okay, so we talked about this just briefly a few minutes ago, the centralized system of record. So how many people in their business, not manufacturing necessarily, have the one person or tribal knowledge or don't know all the information that they need to know about their business? By show of hands. If your hand's not up, you're shitting me. So there's always the one person that has the answer. There's always back to Bob, nose to flip breaker 15 or whatever it was. There's always that knowledge that you wish you had. And the only way to get it right now is to call someone, to email some, text, chat, whatever method you choose. And there's always a delay in that. Imagine a future where you had a system of record inside of your business that you could actually go in and query and ask multiple things about your business. So let's talk about a few examples. I'm going to jump down to the third paragraph from the bottom. This could include things like product manuals, troubleshooting steps, solutions to past problems. How many people, by show of hands, have gone, man, we did this a year ago, what did we do? And then you're digging around trying to find the solution to your problem, right? Well, if you could document that and put it in there so that it's easily available next time, or easily available for the person that you haven't hired yet when this person's gone now, those become really important things to be able to store. Training documentation, SOPs, company policies, keep it going, customer manuals, customer videos, anything that you can imagine in PDF, video, text form, whatever form you decide, you could have all that information uploaded into a privatized AI. This is not something that I want you to go leave here today and go uploading all your SAPs and product manuals and design drawings and everything into the LLMs. But if you have a privatized AI, you can build a system of record. So you no longer have fragmented silos in your business, but you have a unified location for all company information, manufacturing information, process information, whatever you decide to put up there. You could digitize tasks at shop floor and technical experts, such as an experienced operator. You know, let's say that my best operator on CNC machine number 12 is moving on. He knows just how to set up the machine and everything along those lines. You can document all of that through the process so that you have it next time. You can eliminate silos. How many people, by show of hands in their business, have someone who hoards the knowledge because it either strokes their ego, makes them feel important, keeps their job there, or they're just a pain in the ass, by show of hands? Yeah, they're out there, right? So you could eliminate that knowledge hoarding. You know, this is going to get me the promotion. This is my fiefdom. I'm not going to move on from here. I'm not sharing. You could do any of those things where you can break down departmental boundaries and you can document that tribal knowledge. So there's so much tribal knowledge. If you can imagine in our business, software development, we write millions of lines of code, and we know at any point in time we're working with about 40 different companies, and we know all of their processes, but it's reserved to a couple of individuals. So what we've resorted to is sharing that information among the team and with AI and our own private AI, so that we don't have somebody who's on vacation and we don't know how to fix a problem, or somebody wins the lottery, anything along those lines. So biggest thing it can do is improve the time to answer. You know how you're working on something? Show of hands. You're working on something and you're typing away at it, and you get to a certain point and you're like, oh damn, I need this from Sally down the hall. And then you send a chat to Sally and you text her and you say, hey, check Teams, and you send her an email and say, hey, check Teams and text, because you need this in order to move forward. Show of hands. So that time to answer is very important, and what that is it's efficiency lost. So I'm sure that all of you in this room are very well paid executives, and your time is very valuable. It's probably one of the most valuable commodities that you have. So if we can get answers to those things quickly and we can move on to with what we need to move on to, it becomes huge. And then it eliminates excuses. You know, so hey, I don't know, Julie, did you give us, can you give us an update? Oh, I didn't get that to work. I didn't work on that yet. Okay, but we really need that information in order to feed it to the design team in order to move forward. Now we can just go to the system of record and we can ask the system of record what Julie knows, and we can keep the whole process moving forward. And then we can make decisions based on trusted data. So this is everything that you've created. It's all you. So back to the other question. Now we've really given this thing guardrails, and it's only Cambridge's data, for instance. It's all of our data. It's not what the world thinks, it's what we at Cambridge know, for instance, that this is what works. And reducing errors, the number of errors, trial and error is another big thing. Rework, not only rework on the plant floor, but rework in the office. It's a big time saver. The old saying is, if you don't have time to do it right, when you have time to do it again, well, we could eliminate that need to do it again because we're able to do this with trusted data from a knowledgeable source that we know we're going to get the right answers to or from quickly. And then again, it's conversational. So I can have a conversation with it. I don't just get an answer out of how many people have ever read a spec manual or if you're putting together one of these god-awful bookcases or something like that, and you get to a certain point in the instructions and you're like, well, you know, that doesn't make any sense, and you would love to be able to ask a question about, well, if I have part A but I don't have part B, how am I supposed to assemble the two? So you can ask it questions back and forth and it can save you a ton of time. Okay? Questions? All right, let's keep moving. Okay, let's talk a little bit more about VLA. So what you see in the top right-hand corner, and I'm sure it's hard to read from the back, is you see an old school robot that has been retrofitted with a camera system that uses VLA to look into a bin of parts. What you see on the bottom right-hand corner, if you notice, let's take the blue widget in the top right corner. Some of them are blue, some of them are green. The green is the robot recognizing the part. If you look in the bottom right, there's looks like a rubber O-ring maybe. It can identify those rubber O-rings. Remember before, your robot worked off an XYZ axis, so it knew that it went to XY coordinate, this, then it moved back so much, and then it moved back, and it moved back, and it moved back to pick those parts up. Now with the VLA systems, these robots are able to look into any kind of a bin, navigate, and pick a part out of a jumble. It's huge. So this is something that really, like we said earlier, started in 23, really came along in 2025. But the ability to have AI picking robots with VLA hardware integrations, it can now pick just about anything out of anything. They can even like shuffle cards and everything like this. It's pretty amazing to watch some of the videos. What that VLA does is it enables AI inspection automation. So now these cameras, this VLA architecture is able to look down at the microscopic level, if you need it at that level, to pick out flaws in the material or an assembly that just looks a little bit off that the human eye might not even be able to pick. So if you got a lot of people doing inspection operations, the VLA architecture can really move that thing forward, and it can actually improve your quality because it's better at recognizing the imperfections than the human eye can. And then again, there's a lot of kits out these days where you can retrofit. One example is, if you remember, like an old ASRS used to have a wire buried into the concrete and it would follow the wire around. Well, now these things they look around them and they can navigate in an open structure. It can recognize humans, it can recognize racking, it can even recognize the barcode that it's going to pick and verify that the barcode's right. So it's no longer I have to follow this wire down and then make a left on this wire, and I know to go down 3 bays and up five shelves. It's more like it's able to just navigate freely and go in and pick what it needs to do. So the VLA architecture has moved this miles ahead. Now keep in mind that is for GPS, sensors, vision. It's not just for the cameras for picking. It's all the things that these automated machines are doing. What was it back in, I think it was back in 1970, a robot was able to pick up a tray and navigate a restaurant and work its way through, which was great. But now with the VLA architecture on top of it, it can navigate through the restaurant and it could deliver your food exactly within a very specific spot. So this is a big deal for manufacturers. If you've got any of the problems where you've got lots of people that are doing sorting or staging for robots, I'm staging my parts into a metal or a plastic bin rather, where I've got to set all the parts in to turn it over to the robot in the machine. All those operations can really be streamlined with this. Questions?
Yes? How far behind are we from people in other countries like China? I've heard people China and other countries and they say, wow, we're behind. We're behind. This guy.
Chinese manufacturing has been in kind of a tough spot over the last couple of years. Mexico has come far forward more in it, but a lot of the Mexican companies don't have the capital to invest in this kind of technology. So I don't know if we are the leader. I don't know if we're 2, 3, 4, or 5, but we're way up the curve, more so than a lot of manufacturers across the world. Good question. Okay, let's keep going. The bad. All right, a little frown face. So, I know this is really small for the people in the back of the room, so I'll give you a hand here. So, number one, more sophisticated cybercrime. How many people, and if you don't want to raise your hand, I get it, but how many people have almost clicked on, I'm not going to ask the ransomware question, how many people have almost clicked on a phishing scheme and went, holy crap? Yeah, all right, yeah. It happened to me the other day. I had a calendar invite come in for a 3 a.m. on a Saturday morning appointment, and I was typing an email, and my Outlook reminder popped up, and when I hit spacebar in the email that I was drafting, that calendar invite was the first one in my Outlook reminders, and the spacebar opened it. So I saw immediately, there was a little progress there. It said downloading 0%. I killed it immediately. I unplugged the PC from the network. I was luckily building another PC that I was going to use, that one that I mentioned earlier. But we went back in to look at it, and it got past all of our virus scanners and everything, because what it was doing in the JavaScript in the background of this calendar invite, this is an Outlook calendar invite, they're supposed to be text-based, just in case anybody's curious. In the background of the JavaScript, it passed through a whole bunch of good URLs, but the JavaScript was taking those URLs and modifying them and changing them into a bad URL, and it was going to take me out to the bad URL, and it was about your Office 365 is out of license or something like that. And it was going to get my password, and it was going to take my password and then take over who knows what. At that point, it could have been ransomware or anything else. So just like that quickly, those things can happen to you. I've got a PSA up here. Do not click on anything out of any email ever. And if you think that sounds ridiculous, that's how easy that can happen. I got another one the other day. It said, it was a plain email. It looked, I'm one of the admins for our Office 365. It looked like every other Office 365 email that I've gotten ever. I get them every month. It was identical. I even put them up. It even came from noreply@microsoft.com. So they spoofed the email address, and there was a statement in there. They're always trying to do something like, hey, if you don't do this by the end of the day, we're going to shut the account down. Microsoft's not going to do that. They want you to be a customer. They're not going to kill your account for the next 10 years because they want the agreement signed today. So if there's anything that comes up that requires a login, so what I did in that case, I went into Office Admin and I logged in and I looked around at the top for you need to sign this new agreement, and there wasn't anything. I Googled where is the location of this agreement, and I Googled it and I looked at it, and I mean, I was that close to actually clicking on it. And we've been doing technology for 30 years. So it can happen just in an instant. So please don't click on anything. If you see something that comes in, go to the source. So in this case, I went out to the admin portal for Microsoft and I logged in there and I checked it. But do not click on the link in the email and go out to the source, because it is most likely a phishing scheme these days. And they are really, really good. Okay? So please don't click on anything. So there are these things called script kiddies and vibe hackers these days, where they don't know what they're doing, but they can build stuff in AI to do all kinds of things like access networks. There's certain situations where they're creating psychologically manipulative messages that they're sending out to people to try to get them to show up someplace or click on something or do something. I had Amarin call a good friend of mine that owns a bistro over where we live and said, hey, your bill is 60 days past due. If you don't pay the bill today, we're shutting your power off. Seems pretty legitimate, right? Well, what they didn't do is they didn't go to the Amarin site and check it. They wired $10,000 to Amarin. 67-year-old guy, nicest guy you would ever know, but the older you get, the more they prey on you. He actually said, as soon as I turned 65, the number of attacks on my account quadrupled. So they know who you are, they know all about you, so please be careful. The demand for utilities driven by the data center. There's some stats up here I want you guys to know about. So everybody knows there's increased electrical consumption, increased water consumption for these data centers. There's a lot of controversy about it and everything like this. So a typical data center consumption is around 300,000 gallons of water per day, 300,000. A typical home is 300. So a typical data center uses the equivalent in fresh water, and remember that our fresh water supply is not unlimited, of 1,000 homes. So massive water consumption, and that's just a typical data center. They're not one of these major data centers. And then a large data center operating a 100 megawatt service consumes over 2.4 million kilowatts per day. A typical home is 30. So 2.4 million kilowatts versus 30. So the amount of power and water that they consume is massive. And eventually this is going to cause an increase in utility costs. Amazon's going to take advantage of this, you know. If they got to produce more, they got to charge more, and that's going to ultimately affect the manufacturers. To speed up just a little bit here, midterm election interference. So already with the 2026 midterm approach, candidates are using AI to create deepfake attack ads. And this is the one that I mentioned earlier. If you go online, you can find a debate with an AI-generated Virginia opponent that doesn't exist. I forget who he's debating, but this opponent is debating with one of the current candidates, and none of it ever took place. So now there's all kinds of lawsuits about identity theft and everything along those lines. So this disinformation campaign, not only coming from the political side, but the hacker side, is getting really bad to the point where they're psychologically manipulating us into what we want to look at. So please be cautious about everything that you look at. Verify it. Unfortunately, we're going to have to do that. And again, that could make a major impact on the U.S. economy and really drive the divide even further. And then all of you might have heard in October of last year, Amazon mentioned that it was going to lay off 14,000 workers because of AI advancements. Anybody hear about this? And they announced another 2,400 this January. They're not AI. It's not that they've increased the efficiency that much. They're laying off that many people because they need the budget to build more AI. So they need to build more data centers, and they need to do more things. So I don't want you to be talking about misinformation. I don't want you to think that AI is that good that all of a sudden Amazon can lay off 16,400 people that they didn't need in their corporate office. AI is not that good yet, but they need $100 billion over the next 10 years to build their technology. That's their goal right now. And unfortunately, other companies like Microsoft, IBM are following suit. Other companies are doing more gracious things. They're doing layoffs. They're doing paid early retirements. They're doing severance packages and things like that. But it's actually become a real hit to the Seattle area where Amazon's corporate headquarters are, the town. It's almost like an old mining town that dried up, where there's 14,000 less people working in that vicinity. So imagine the impact of that on any metropolitan area. So that's going to impact consumers. The people that don't have the jobs can't buy things that we're producing, so it's ultimately going to affect us. And that comes from the National CIO Review and Forbes, if anybody's curious about the source for that one. Okay, the bizarre. Let's move on a little bit and let's have a little bit of fun here. So the top right, my daughter and I are sitting at a Mizzou football game and a robot walks out and directs the band. You can see him there. Now, in all fairness, some 6'5" guy that probably weighed 280 had to grab the thing by the back of the neck and take it down off of the stand that it was directing from. And there were 3 other conductors up there that were directing the band. But just interesting to see, the year before, it was a 4-legged dog that walked out and was actually walking amidst the band and everything like that. So it's kind of getting interesting. This one I think is really funny. An autonomous vending machine attempted to contact the FBI because it had a $2 discrepancy on its account. And then the bottom picture is known as a GPT pen, and you can just run it over text and it will translate, scan, and capture the text for you. And you can pick this up for $50 at Walmart. So pretty impressive stuff. And then this one, I'm not sure what to think about. It's called a friend in a jar. And it's a 5.5-inch hologram that plugs into Grok, and you can kind of hang out with it on your desktop. So you can pick your avatar, guys, girls, a little swirly green thing that you can put on screen, but you can now have a friend in a jar that can talk to you when you're lonely. Okay, and have any of you ever seen the horror movie where there's this creature that like goes scurrying across the ceiling and freaks everybody in the movie out? That's what these humanoid robots remind me of. So this is kind of like a time lapse. They come all folded up, down with the head turned upside down, like one of them creepy things scurrying across the ceiling, and then they start to stand up and the head turns around, and now they're a robot. This is a Boston Dynamics robot. This robot is capable now of moving parts from place to place, walking through the shop and delivering product and everything along those lines. They're working on it, really essentially replacing factory workers. Again, X with the Tesla factory is going to have these, not the Boston Dynamics, their own robot in their factories by the end of the year running a lot of the production. So it just like the blue-faced guy directing things, it's just a little creepy to me. Okay, you're not going to be able to read this, so I'm going to read it to you. So this is something from a gentleman by the name of Clint H., the CEO of Ask SLM. They're trying to do more responsive AI. And what he did is he put together 5 different packages here: ChatGPT, Grok, Gemini, Claude, and Perplexity. And I'm going to read you some of the best fours so that you can learn this a little bit. The most important thing, though, if you look on the right, AI is not like picking a sports team. It's not like saying, we're going to go with Gemini, and Gemini is our one and only. They are each good at their own thing. We probably use about 6 or 7 AIs in the work that we do and the work that we do for companies to produce code. So they're all good at this, different things. So you don't pick an AI and stick with it through thick and thin. You really need to bounce around a little bit because you really have the ability to assemble the perfect sports team here. If I need, for instance, something that's really eloquently written, I'll go to ChatGPT. If I need something that's really going to pour through the web and find the answer that I'm looking for, I go to Grok. If we need something like the psychological testing example, we use Claude. We use a ton of Grok in the background for technical inquiries and things like that. So we go all over the place, and like I said, there were 4 or 5 tools used to create this. So real quick, ChatGPT is best for creative content, coding, and everyday productivity workflows. Grok is best for real-time trends, pop culture, and candid insights. Grok has access to X and the web, which a lot of the large language models don't. They use their own large language model. Gemini is best for integration with Google Workspace and real-time data access. Replace that with Copilot, and it's the same for Copilot and Microsoft Office and their suite of tools. Claude is best for deep reading, comprehension, and ethical reasoning. And Perplexity, which you can get through LinkedIn for free for a year, I think that's offer still going. It's best for verified research, fact-checking, and summarized knowledge. Perplexity will actually give you where it got its information from. So it'll cite the sources. Yes?
You've got all these working in conjunction. Is it still a manual move to take data from one to the other, or is there an API that connects?
If you're working with an agent or an AI-enabled app, you have the ability to build that infrastructure where it's extensible, where it can punch into multiple sources. So it really becomes almost like an API. I can switch from this API to this API. It's the same line of thinking where you can build it so that you can switch the source. As a lot of people don't do that. They build it, they kind of entrench themselves in the one language, and then they have to go back and do a rewrite. Okay, gang, wrapping up here. So challenges that you will face: investment costs, a need for skilled workforce, data security and privacy. We glazed over that one a little bit. I can't stress enough, look at the packages that you're using. A lot of companies are now shutting down access to all LLMs, and they're dictating to their employees, you're going to use a Copilot or you're going to use a Gemini, and then they go into the Copilot and Gemini settings and they lock it down for who can do what within those. So Azure now offers a fully privatized service where you can spin up your own AI engine where nothing gets out, but I can't stress enough, do it securely. And then integration with existing systems, so getting systems to talk to each other, but that's the beauty of AI, is it can talk to everything. So what will 2026 bring? Maybe we'll get together next year and talk about what we saw this year and what's coming for 2027. So thank you all for the time and attention.